In the summer of 2022, Pakistan faced one of the most devastating natural disasters in its modern history. Torrential rains and flash floods submerged nearly one-third of the country. Villages disappeared underwater, crops were destroyed, millions of homes collapsed, and over 33 million people were displaced. Entire families lost everything they had, and many communities, even today, remain in ruins. It was a disaster so large in scale that it became a global wake-up call. But the most haunting reality is that this was not just a tragedy for Pakistan, it was a warning for the entire world, especially for America. The truth is simple but urgent. Climate change does not respect borders. It does not distinguish between a developing nation like Pakistan or a global superpower like the United States. If we do not learn from what happened there, then America will soon find itself facing disasters of a similar magnitude and perhaps even greater. Climate change is not some distant threat waiting for future generations. It is here, it is now, and it is accelerating. What Pakistan endured is a window into what unchecked climate vulnerability looks like. It revealed how fragile even the most resilient communities can become when confronted with the combined forces of extreme weather and weak preparedness. The rain that season was unprecedented. Some provinces received 3 to 5 times their usual rainfall. Glaciers in the north melted at alarming rates. Riverbanks collapsed. The system simply could not absorb such pressure, and the human cost was catastrophic. When we see these images, it is easy to think of it as a distant tragedy. But I urge you not to make that mistake, because America too is standing on the edge of its own climate crises. And the lessons from Pakistan must be taken seriously before it is too late. Consider this. In the United States, we are already seeing wildfires turn once thriving communities into ashes. We have watched entire towns in California burn to the ground. We have witnessed hurricanes grow stronger, like Katrina, Harvey, and Ian, leaving behind devastation measured not only in dollars, but in broken lives. Rising sea levels are threatening Miami, New Orleans, and other coastal cities. In the Midwest, drought is crippling farms. In the West, reservoirs that millions depend on are drying up. America is not immune. It is simply wealthier. But wealth is not a shield against the forces of nature. Money cannot buy back lost lives. Money cannot rebuild communities washed away by water or reduced to cinders by fire. Money cannot reverse the damage if we fail to act in time. What happened in Pakistan is not only about a developing nation's lack of resources, it is about what happens when governments, communities, and societies underestimate the force of climate change and overestimate their ability to recover after disaster strikes. America cannot afford to make the same mistake. Preparedness is not just about reacting when disaster hits. It is about building resilience long before the first storm forms, the first fire sparks, or the first drought spreads across the land. In Pakistan, the lack of resilient infrastructure turned heavy rains into an existential catastrophe. Roads collapsed, leaving aid workers stranded. Hospitals were destroyed, leaving the injured untreated. Crops drowned, leaving millions hungry. The U.S. must recognize that even with its advanced systems, its infrastructure is dangerously outdated in many places. Bridges, levees, electrical grids, and water systems were built for a different climate, a climate that no longer exists. If we do not adapt them now, they will fail us when we need them most. And let us be clear, preparedness is not simply about engineering stronger dams or raising higher levees. It is also about preparing society as a whole to withstand and recover from shocks. It is about building early warning systems that reach every household, ensuring emergency shelters are accessible, and providing the most vulnerable with the resources they need before disaster strikes. It is about educating communities so that individuals know how to respond, and about investing in sustainable policies that protect the environment rather than exploit it. The lesson from Pakistan is also a lesson in equity. Climate change does not affect all people equally. The poor, the marginalized, the communities with the fewest resources are always hit hardest. In Pakistan, it was the poorest farmers and villagers who lost the most. In America, too, we have seen this pattern, whether it was in New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina or in Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria. Vulnerability is not only geographical, it is social. Preparedness, therefore, must mean more than technology and infrastructure. It must mean justice. It must mean ensuring that no community is left behind, that the most vulnerable are given the greatest support, and that resilience is shared by all, not just the privileged few. We must also face the uncomfortable truth that disasters are not random acts of fate. They are amplified, intensified, and multiplied by our own actions. When Pakistan flooded, the country contributed less than 1% to global carbon emissions, yet it paid one of the highest prices. America, by contrast, is one of the largest emitters in history. The responsibility is therefore greater. Preparedness must include not only responding to disasters, but reducing the risks that make them inevitable. If we continue to pour carbon into the atmosphere, if we continue to ignore the warnings of scientists, if we continue to prioritize short-term gain over long-term survival, then we are not preparing at all. We are accelerating the disaster. This is why America must not see Pakistan's tragedy as someone else's problem, but as a mirror of what could happen here. If 33 million people can be displaced in Pakistan in a matter of weeks, imagine the impact if even a fraction of that scale were to happen in the U.S. Imagine mass evacuations from Florida, Texas, or California. Imagine the economic shockwaves if entire agricultural regions fail due to climate extremes. Imagine the political and social unrest that would follow when millions are left homeless or jobless. Preparedness is not optional. It is survival. And yet, despite the urgency, America has often been slow to act. Climate debates get lost in partisan politics. Investments in resilience are delayed. Funding for renewable energy, green infrastructure, and adaptation programs gets cut or blocked. Meanwhile, the clock is ticking. Every year of delay increases the risks, increases the costs, and increases the human suffering to come. The lesson from Pakistan is therefore not only a scientific one or an environmental one, it is a moral one. It is about recognizing our responsibility to prepare, to adapt, and to lead. If the United States, with all its resources, fails to learn from the suffering of others, then we will have no excuse when disaster comes knocking on our own doors. Preparedness requires courage. The courage to invest now for a safer tomorrow. The courage to set aside short-term politics for long-term survival. The courage to admit that we are vulnerable and to take action before it is too late. So let us not look at Pakistan's floods and say, what a tragedy for them. Let us look at Pakistan's floods and say, what a warning for us. Let us use that warning to build resilience, to strengthen our infrastructure, to protect our most vulnerable, and to lead the fight against climate change with urgency and determination. Because if we do not, the disasters that have scarred Pakistan will find their echoes in America, and we will look back at this moment not as a call to action, but as a chance we failed to take. Ladies and gentlemen, the water has already risen. The storms have already grown stronger. The fires have already spread wider. The question now is not whether disasters will come. They will. The question is whether we will be prepared. The lesson is before us, written in the suffering of millions. The only question left is, will we learn it before it's too late? Thank you. When disaster strikes, it exposes the strength or weakness of a nation's foundation. In 2022, Pakistan suffered catastrophic floods that submerged villages, displaced millions, and left a trail of devastation still visible today. The rains were extraordinary, yes, but what turned a natural calamity into a human tragedy was not simply the water, it was the weakness of the systems meant to protect people. Infrastructure crumbled, roads washed away, hospitals failed to cope, relief could not reach those in need. And perhaps most painfully, the social safety nets meant to support the vulnerable were thin or entirely absent. The tragedy of Pakistan is not just in the rains that fell, but in the systems that failed. And this is where America must take heed, because the greatest danger is not the storm itself, but our unpreparedness to withstand it. America has more wealth, more technology, and more resources than Pakistan, but wealth does not guarantee resilience. If infrastructure is weak, if systems are neglected, if safety nets are ignored, then even the most powerful nation in the world can find itself brought to its knees when disaster comes. Think about the scenes in Pakistan. Bridges collapsed, leaving communities cut off for weeks. Crops drowned, destroying livelihoods for millions of farmers. Children were left without schools not for days, but for months, because classrooms were destroyed and never rebuilt. Families waited desperately for aid, but trucks carrying supplies were stuck on broken roads. The government scrambled, international donors rushed in, but the sheer scale of destruction overwhelmed everything. When the foundation is weak, even the best intentions cannot hold up the weight of disaster. Now let us look to America. Our infrastructure, too, is aging. Bridges, dams, and levees, many built decades ago, were designed for a climate that no longer exists. Power grids are strained by record heat waves, as we saw in Texas when millions were left without electricity during a deadly winter storm. Dams and levees have failed under the pressure of rising waters, flooding homes and businesses. Highways buckle under extreme heat, and airports shut down when storms grow stronger. Just as in Pakistan, weak infrastructure magnifies disaster. And if America does not learn from this, we will find ourselves reliving the same suffering on our own soil. But infrastructure is not just concrete and steel. It is also the systems of care and support that keep societies functioning when everything else breaks down. In Pakistan, millions of displaced people found little refuge. Emergency shelters were overcrowded, understocked, and often inaccessible. Health systems, already stretched thin, collapsed under the weight of waterborne diseases and injuries. There were too few doctors, too few medicines, and too little coordination. The result was predictable. The poorest suffered the most, and many died not just from the flood itself, but from the failures that followed. The United States must understand this lesson deeply. Social safety nets are not luxuries, they are lifelines. When disaster comes, it is not only about whether a bridge stands or a levee holds. It is also about whether a family has somewhere safe to go when their home is destroyed, whether a child can still eat when their school cafeteria is closed, whether an elderly person can still access health care when the hospital is flooded. In America, we have seen how fragile our safety nets can be. During Hurricane Katrina, thousands were stranded in New Orleans, not just because the levees failed, but because the support systems that should have protected them were absent or delayed. During Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, the lack of coordination and investment turned a natural disaster into a prolonged humanitarian crisis. During the COVID-19 pandemic, millions of Americans faced eviction, hunger, and unemployment, revealing just how thin and unequal our safety nets can be. Disaster does not strike all communities equally. Just as in Pakistan, where rural farmers and the urban poor carried the heaviest burdens, in the United States it is often the poor, the marginalized, and the underrepresented who suffer most. Wealthier families can evacuate, they can rebuild. They have insurance and resources. But low-income families, renters, and vulnerable groups are left exposed. This is why strengthening social safety nets is not an optional policy. It is a moral responsibility. To leave the most vulnerable without protection is to guarantee that every disaster will become a humanitarian crisis. Preparedness, therefore, is twofold. It is about building stronger infrastructure, roads that do not collapse, grids that do not fail, hospitals that do not crumble, but it is equally about building stronger safety nets, emergency relief systems that reach everyone, affordable health care that continues even in disaster, housing policies that prevent mass homelessness, and economic systems that ensure people can recover rather than fall into permanent poverty. America has the means to do both, but the question is whether we have the will. Consider what it would mean if we invested seriously in resilience. Imagine power grids powered by renewable energy, resistant to heat waves and storms. Imagine flood control systems that not only protect cities, but also restore natural ecosystems. Imagine hospitals designed to stay operational even under extreme conditions, and schools that double as emergency shelters when needed. Imagine relief funds and insurance programs that do not take years to deliver aid, but provide immediate support to families in need. This is not a dream, it is entirely possible. But it requires learning the lesson Pakistan paid for with blood and suffering. Weak systems turn disasters into catastrophes. There is also another lesson. Rebuilding after disaster is far more expensive than preparing before it. Pakistan will take decades to recover from the 2022 floods, and even now, many families are still without homes or livelihoods. The economic toll is staggering. Tens of billions of dollars in damages, losses that a struggling economy cannot easily bear. America, too, faces the same equation. Each year, climate-related disasters cost the United States hundreds of billions in damages. Every hurricane, every wildfire, every storm drains our economy. And yet, much of this could be prevented, or at least reduced, by investing in resilient infrastructure and stronger social protections ahead of time. The choice is clear. We either pay to prepare, or we pay far more to recover. The story of Pakistan should shake us awake. It should remind us that disaster is not measured only by the force of nature, but by the fragility of what stands in its path. America has the chance to learn without repeating the suffering, but learning requires humility. It requires admitting that despite our wealth and power, we are vulnerable. It requires recognizing that a bridge here can collapse just as a bridge there did, that a family here can be left homeless just as a family there was, and that unless we strengthen both our infrastructure and our social safety nets, we too will face disasters that spiral out of control. The floods in Pakistan were a human tragedy, but they were also a warning that climate change will test the strength of every nation's foundations, a warning that wealth without preparation is meaningless, a warning that social safety nets too thin to catch people will leave millions falling into despair. The question for America is whether we will heed that warning. If we invest now, if we rebuild our systems with resilience in mind, if we ensure that no community is left behind, then when the storms come, and they will, we will not face catastrophe. We will endure, we will protect, and we will recover. But if we ignore the lesson, if we let our bridges decay, if we let our safety nets fray, if we assume that wealth alone will save us, then we will repeat the suffering we saw in Pakistan, and we will have no excuse for it. Ladies and gentlemen, disaster reveals who we truly are. It reveals whether we are a nation that cares for all its people, whether we are wise enough to prepare, and whether we are strong enough to build systems that can withstand the storms of the future. Pakistan has shown us the cost of weakness. America must now show the world the power of preparation. The time to act is not tomorrow, not after the next hurricane or wildfire or flood. The time to act is now, before it is too late.
Thank you.